do me a favor, stop what you're doing right now. Just whatever you're doing, just stop and breathe. That moment that you just felt, that pause, that's what this podcast is about. So Beyond Busy is not just another podcast. It's going to give you fake success formulas or tips. This podcast is going to force you to take time to grow yourself, your business, and your life. So do me a favor. Most people won't subscribe, but they'll listen. If you're listening to this or watching this, please subscribe, and I promise you this will only become more interesting, more real, and more bold over time. Now, if you've come across this video or you're listening to this podcast, I want to welcome you. I'm glad that you're here. This is Beyond Busy, and if you're here, you're already one of us. At 87, Avroy Shlain is still curious, adventurous, and full of life. He created a R1 billion cosmetic empire, and not only is he a dear friend of mine, but he's a mentor, he's a phenomenal entrepreneur, and he is one of the biggest inspirations in my life. I guarantee you that if you listen to this episode, there will be a golden nugget that will drastically change your life for the better. Listen up. You're going to want to hear what this guy has to say. Okay, Avroy, thank you for coming on the show.
It's my pleasure.
I'm so happy to have you here. It's been a long time coming, that's for sure.
Okay.
The first question that I have for you is really just to give listeners a sense of who you are. So if you have to describe, you've had this phenomenal life of entrepreneurial success, but also you have this zest for life where you do so many phenomenal things outside of business and work. And can you just describe sort of who or what shaped you into the person that you are today? Tell us who is Avroy Shlain?
A million things cause the shaping. Could be, some of them are major episodes, some could be funny little things that where do you come from, why do you do that, and immediately you ask that what shapes me. There are major episodes, but it's quite strange that a funny thing comes up. When I was early teens, we moved home for a number of reasons. We ended up in a fairly affluent suburb, but my family wasn't affluent. And all my schoolmates and all that, and we used to go swimming together. And I'll never forget, in about the second year there, how you ask what shapes people. I'll never forget one of the guys saying to me, "Wow, that's a good costume. It's lasted you so many years." And here you are, this poor little boy. I was young. I was barely a teenager. And here he's noticing this, and it was a very old costume, and I couldn't afford a new one, and so on. And it makes you realize the way some people look at things, the way how cruel some people could be. But it definitely said to me, get off your ass and do something so that you can buy a new costume. So that, and in life, when you want something, if you know what you want, you can go out and get it. But there are lots of little things. There's more than that, interesting things like from the family. When I was in Australia, a company I'd worked for, a very big American company, I had a key job. I got there. We parted company, and I was looking for a new job and decided to return to South Africa and start my own company. And one of the first calls I made was to an older sister. I said, Beryl's my wife. Beryl and I have decided we're coming back to South Africa. We're going to start our own company. And the immediate response was, no, of course you're going to do well. I know you'll do well. And that was the kind of family support that I grew up with. I'm one of 4 siblings. And it's quite interesting, especially of late, because I'm the baby of the family. Next one up is a 91-year-old sister, then a 95-year-old sister, and then a 99-year-old brother. And we're all still around. We can all still communicate with each other. There are slip-ups on memory and things like that. But it's been, for me, a very supportive family, starting with a mother and father who were hard workers, and they were lovely people. I only have wonderful thoughts of how they struggled and how they did things, and the love and affection and care and consideration and so on, from all the way from parents through the siblings.
What did your parents do?
What did they do? Well, I always joke about this one because what did they do? Different things. If you want to go back to the beginning of the last century, my father was born in Poland and then emigrated. He went to what was then Palestine under the Ottoman Empire. And my father met my mother. They were like 20-year-olds in what was then the Ottoman Empire. They got married, and my older brother was born there in what was Palestine. And it's quite amusing now because if I get into a political discussion, I can easily start off with, hey, I'll give you my point of view, but just remember, both my parents were Palestinians.
Yeah.
And the Palestinians of that era are different from the Palestinians today. They're worlds apart. But where do I come from? That was my parents. What did they do? My father came to South Africa. It must have been in about 1927. And the first thing he did, an uncle of mine had a facility where they cooked food and fed the guys who worked on the mines. So you had all these, and that's what my father did when he started in this country. He worked there, cooking this place, cleaning dishes and things like that, and making food for these guys who were mine workers. Then from there he became a commercial traveller, and he did various things through life. My first recollection from when I was a boy, probably 8, 9 years old, at that stage, my father had got into some interesting things. If you go back before the time you were born, in the old days, the only cars available here were not like from China and Vietnam and Korea and Germany and Spain and Portugal and America. You had an American car or an English car. And the cars were shipped to South Africa in wooden boxes. And what my father did, he went to the garage where these cars were delivered, and he bought the wooden boxes, took out the nails, and sold the timber. And then he started buying and selling timber, and so he developed a timber yard. And that became quite a successful business in the early part of my life, and that's what supported us. My dad bought and sold timber, and I went to school.
It probably also inspired you. If your dad was an entrepreneur, I mean, did you know at that age, obviously you had the defining moment of the shorts where you knew that if you wanted something, you could earn money to buy it, It
was very obvious. My parents went through, and during the war years, my father was too old to fight in the Second World War, but he became what was then known as civic guard. All the healthy, strong, young policemen, they'd gone to the front to fight in the wars. And there was who was looking after society. And what was developed then was the civic guards, which was basically civilians who became policemen. And my father did that. I was 6, 7, 8 years old at that time. Sorry, just go back. What was your question?
Oh, that the fact that your father had the timber business.
From there, numerous things happened. But that, unfortunately, he lost that. And we went through a very poor era. And those were my teen years from Form 1. What's it today? It was Standard 7 through to Standard 12, Form 1 to Matric.
Sort of high school.
And those years, I can remember going to school and my blazer was 5 inches short on the sleeves because I couldn't afford a new one. And you realize you haven't got everything. You've got to work your butt off to get it. But I went through the school years. I played sport at school, but never to the level of first team or anything. I played rugby, I played cricket, I boxed and all that. But I was not outstanding. Finished matric, and then it was quite interesting. My parents wanted me to study further, do anything. So I started doing pharmacy, which I did for about 3 months, I think. But I really wanted to fly aeroplanes and wanted to be involved with aeroplanes. It was very difficult in those days in South Africa. There was a ballot, and you went into military service or you didn't go in, and there was no ways in South Africa that I could become a pilot or anything. So it was a very interesting part. I decided I'd go to England and join the RAF. And in those days, you realize that was like 1955, 56. There was still a very close, much closer than today, close link between South Africa and England. And so I had to get to England. So I think I had £5 in total in my pocket, and I hitchhiked to Durban, and I went to the harbour every morning. Can I get on a boat? Can I get on a boat? And
this is after school now.
After school, after matric. I'd finished matric. I worked for 3 months pharmacy, gave that up, hitchhiked to Durban. I wanted to now get to England to join the Air Force. And you don't go down and get there and jump on a ship. You got to find out where, when, how, and all that. And I was learning, and it took 6 weeks. But the £5 I had run out, and how do you live and how do you eat? And I'll never forget, I got a job it was before the days of computers and faxes and copiers, and they had a mailing list of thousands of people, and I got paid £1 1,000 to take those addresses and do envelopes. So I sat there doing envelopes, writing out 1,000 at a time to get £1, and then I could pay in a B&B to sleep there and could buy a burger at lunchtime and so on. And then after 6 weeks, I got a job on a boat. And I got the job on the boat, the lowest possible thing you could do, cleaning the bowels of the ship and all that. Got full of grease and filthy and all that. I met some interesting guys, ate some interesting food, and went from Durban, East London, Port Elizabeth, Cape Town, then on to England to Southampton. At Southampton, I got off. And then from there, Southampton, I went to London. And being a stupid 17-year-old, not really thinking, I got to London. I went, instead of looking, where am I going to stay? I went to movies. And I saw, watch this movie. It came out, it was like 10 o'clock at night. I thought, what do I do now? So I saw a policeman. I said, where can I sleep, sort of thing. And he sent me to one of these where the poor people, where they pick drunk people up off the gutters and stick them in the room so that they are safe for the night. They showed me one of those places, and that's where I stayed my first night in London. But then I started asking questions, and I went to the recruiting centre for the Air Force, and they said, no, you don't just come here, sign up and go in. In 6 weeks' time, there's an examination. You'll come to a big hall. You'll write an exam to see whether you go any further. So what am I going to do? Here I'm in London. I think I had about £5 left from the ship, my pay. And I got it. The people asked questions, and I rented digs for about £2 a week. And they told me, go to the Lions Oxford Corner House. It's a reading place. There was a very big one that seated 600 people or something. And what job did I get? The first job I could get was a backdoor porter. Do you know what a backdoor porter is? You empty the rubbish bins onto the trucks.
Yes.
So that's my first job in London, emptying the dustbin. But in those days, if you think back 56, there wasn't the internet, there wasn't a connection. And people, where are you from? And said, I'm from South Africa. Why aren't you black? This was, people didn't understand that. And I'd been there a very short while emptying dustbins, and one of the managers came down and he said, he was very interested I was from South Africa, and he said, did you go to school? I said, yeah, I went to school. And he said, how far? I said, no, I got the university entrance. He said, and you're emptying dustbins, let's see what I can do. That was an incredible break. And he gave me a job working in the forecast department. I'd get the weather forecasts, the history. How many salads do I make for the next day? And then give those forecasts to the kitchens to make. And that was my first sort of real job. So I had an income. And also in that job, I got breakfast as well. If I got there early before the starting time, I could get. So there I had I could start eating properly. And I worked there for 6 weeks. Then I had this call up the RAF, and I went in with two, it was a lot, like it gets close to 1,000 guys in an enormous hall, and you write an exam. I said, what now? And they said, well, we'll give you the results in a month's time. Then I was back to work. And then you start working. And then I got the call up saying, you've been accepted. And together 200 guys were accepted out of the thousands. And we went to Hornchurch, was the RAF base, where you do your square bashing and you do tests and you do exams. And I was there for a little while only. And I wanted to be a pilot. I didn't want to be a mechanic or an engineer or anything. I wanted to fly. And then I'd been there a little while, square bashing and all that. And they called me in and said, with your eyes, you can't fly. And that was, my world came to an end. So I'd signed for 10 years, but if you haven't got your flying hours, then you can leave right away. So I left and my world had come, but I had no money to come home. So there I was 17 years old in London. So I had done bookkeeping in matric. I managed to get a job doing numbers in a garage, in a motor car sales place. And I used to do calculation of the commissions for the guys. And I had digs. But what does a little boy like that know about maintaining yourself? You get your pay on Friday, you go to the movies, you go for dinners and all that. Comes Wednesday,
got no money.
You got no money. From Wednesday to Friday, I didn't eat, Then I got smart. Then I started buying a box of jungle oats that I could mix with water. And on Thursdays and Friday mornings, I could have jungle oats. So, what all this reminds me is now and again I do the mentoring or talking to youngsters and all that. And they look at people, some of the people that they've worked for or people they know, and they see 4 motor cars, a holiday home, an aeroplane that they own and overseas trips. They look at this, it's wonderful. But they got to learn life doesn't start. If you're born into that, that's 1 in a zillion. But most people aren't born into that. If you visualize that and you see that, it can be what you have eventually, but it doesn't just happen. So there I was in London, and I wanted to go home. And my family didn't have money to send me for a ticket to come home. There was no telephone and, hi, Ma, how are you today? And you'd write a letter, and 2 weeks later you'd get a reply and all that. So I worked as a bookkeeper for a long time, and then I wanted to do more interesting things, so I got a job as a dishwasher in the restaurant. So I'd work as a bookkeeper during the day, and from 6 till midnight, I'd wash dishes. But that was interesting because I'd obviously washed the dishes well, and the woman who ran the restaurant said she'll upgrade me, and I could then boil water, fry eggs, make spaghetti,
do
things like that, which was very useful to me, and I learned that. And then when it was nearly 2 years in England before, no family, no friends, nobody. It was very lonely. It was
hard at that age.
And support, 17-year-old. When I talk to people now and they say, it was different in 1950. It was different, but let me tell you, little boy on your own.
It's tough.
It's 17. You've got to fend for yourself.
Well, sometimes I question whether that wasn't better than how kids grow up today, because there's something that you said that was interesting, and it reminded me, there's a story that my dad told me, and that was he walked into his father's factory once, and there was this cloud of smoke and dust. It was a very terrible working environment. And there was his dad, he had come to South Africa, was trying to make a living. And there was his dad sitting on like sort of a bench trying to eat his sandwich, but his hands were black. And the story that my dad told me was that he remembers feeling horrified by seeing that and saying he knows he never wants to end up there, Yeah. And the second thing is that you told me a story once of when you started the Avroy Shlain cosmetics business, and you spoke about how your exact words, I think, were, You have no idea how tough it is when you don't even have money to buy a pen.
Well,
And the reason why I'm bringing that up is because I do think there's a sense of resilience that was built into you from a really young age, having to survive at 17 in London.
It's interesting, people who've never been hungry, people who've never gone out and they've had to borrow a jacket and the sleeves were 5 inches too short. Unless you've lived through that, you don't understand when somebody else is in that, and this is why, you raised this point of the cosmetic company. A lot of people said, why did you start it and what did you do and how did it go and so on. Look, Beryl and I started that business. We had to earn a living, and I'd been working, I'd had at that stage about 14 years of corporate experience working for 2 different big American companies. I had that experience and decided to go on my own. And the first question is, why did you do that? And there is the answer